welcome back to another edition of Bailey Price Media Live.
Bailey Price Media, I like it.
What's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. Welcome back to another episode of Bailey Price Media Live. Today, I got a great show for you. Host of the Sitdown Crime Podcast, Jeff Nadu, joins the show. Jeff's also a betting extraordinaire, one of the best bettors on the internet, so check him out, and he'll be joining in a sec. Today, we're going to break down the allegations against Justin Tucker and whether the Ravens are going to actually cut him. I think not looking too good for Justin Tucker, but we'll discuss that. We'll also discuss Penn State hiring Trace McSorley, former Penn State quarterback, as their assistant quarterback coach. So we'll discuss that as well. Also discuss the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl victory and Cooper DeJean's impact on the Philadelphia Eagles, along with Big Don DeSandro. I want to get Jeff's take on that as well. We're going to discuss Terrell Suggs pleading guilty to some interesting charges here, and NFL draft talk, NFL scouting combine talk. Travis Hunter is not participating, neither is Shador. You'll see them at Colorado's Pro Day, along with that and so much more. Without further ado, let's go and bring in host of the Sit Down Crime Podcast, betting extraordinaire, Jeff Nadu. How you doing, man? Thank you for joining.
What's up, brother? Thank you for having me. I want to thank you, man. You've done some great work for me, man, with some of the thumbnails and everything. I really appreciate it. And I see you're doing your own thing, doing some of your own content, and I'm sure you'll do just fine.
Man, I appreciate you, brother. It's all love, man. Well, let's get into it, man. I want to start with Philadelphia Eagles. Your Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl. I haven't heard your take and discuss this with you at all. What are your take on this? What does this mean to the city of Philadelphia? What are your thoughts on the game? Was it a good game? I thought it was kind of an average game, to be honest. But what are your thoughts on the Eagles Super Bowl victory?
Well, I think anybody that's an Eagles fan, you grew up as an Eagles fan. It's a rite of passage. You know, your Sundays are Eagles football. And no matter how old you get, you still always are happy when the Eagles are on. For me, I've obviously gotten to the point where, gambling is obviously very important to me. And I'm not necessarily as much a fan as I was when I was a kid, but, it's definitely big for the city. Philadelphia is a blue-collar city. They love their Philadelphia Eagles, and, it's always great when they're relevant. They're the most important team in this town by a wide margin. And, look, I think all year the Eagles are the best team. I thought, the culture really shone through with this team. They went out and made perfect moves. You mentioned some of the young kids they brought in their secondary with DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, and just kind of a good mix of veterans and also good young rookies that could come in right away and be a problem. They go out and get a group of linebackers that finally started to play well. It just meant a lot. The coaching was great, and I think as a fan and as a guy that bet the Eagles, I had no issue with it. But as a neutral, I would have probably thought the game probably sucked to most people.
Yeah, but I think a lot of NFL fans are happy that the Eagles took out Chiefs Queendom. You mentioned some guys in the secondary. I got to ask you about your main man Cooper DeJean. He had a pick six in the Super Bowl. I don't know if this is true, but I believe he's the first white boy corner to have a pick six in the Super Bowl. What were your thoughts on his performance this season? I think he was returning kicks for the Eagles or punts for the Eagles as well. What does he mean to the Eagles and his impact this season? What are your thoughts?
Well, I remember at one point last year when some of the mocks were coming out, I think a lot of people had him mocked to Philadelphia in the first round. And, and then when they were able to not only get Quinyon, but then get him in the second round, it seemed like kind of fool's gold for the Eagles. I thought, wow, you get both these kids. It'll take some time for them to get going. But, this team really needed DeJean due to the fact that they didn't really have, the whole Bradbury thing didn't work out. They were kind of working with just kind of journeyman, Marcus Epps. Sidney Brown never kind of materialized into being a starting safety. And once they brought back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you go from having kind of a very weak secondary to a bang-up secondary, because now you have two starting safeties. You have Reed Blankenship, you have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and then you could put Cooper DeJean essentially in the nickel. And the nickel had been a position they needed because Avonte Maddox hadn't really materialized. He had kind of been injured a lot. So it really stabilized. You had the safeties, you then get the nickel, and your corners are terrific with Darius Slay and obviously now Quinyon. So, yeah, I mean, the depth was great for this team all year, though, too. I mean, they just had players just kind of worked out all season. You look at across the board, and a lot of players that teams gave up on. Zach Bond had kind of been given up on by the Saints. Mekhi Becton at tackle had kind of been given up on. They moved him to right guard, and it just kind of worked out. So, yeah, everything kind of fell into place. For the most part, they had no injuries all year, and DeJean was great. I mean, what a maturation throughout the season.
Absolutely, and DeJean coming out of Iowa, you couldn't have asked for a better rookie season. I don't know how big this is, just a PFF stat, but Cooper DeJean was the #1 rated cornerback in the entire league for the 2024 season. Obviously, you mentioned he played that nickel position for the Eagles, but I think his impact was definitely felt. It was nice seeing him make that type of play in the Super Bowl. I don't know if you remember the Super Bowl about 10 years ago with the Seahawks versus the Broncos with Peyton Manning. Malcolm Smith had a pick six after Chris Clemens and Cliff Averill got to Peyton. Reminded me of that same play. That game reminded me like eerily the same. Just kind of a blowout. Just the Chiefs kind of came back at the end, but the Eagles had that block.
Well, I think the thing is, if we look towards next year, I mean, Philadelphia Eagles aren't going away. I mean, a lot of this team will be back. Obviously, you're not going to be able to keep everybody. But as you alluded to, I mean, this secondary is extremely young outside of Slay. I think you still probably get another year or two out of him. I'm sure they're going to re-sign Zach Bond, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, all those guys are under contract, Nolan Smith. So, I mean, this is a group that's mostly going to be back next year. The offense, I think, is essentially all going to be back. So I would have to think they should be the deserving favorite going into next season. And we're also hearing that, look, is Howie Roseman going to make a play for Myles Garrett? I think for sure. Absolutely. If you could somehow get Myles Garrett on this team, I think without him, they're the favorite, but they would be the going away favorite next year if he was able to be attained.
Have to be. Absolutely. And Jalen Hurts' contract, he doesn't have a ginormous contract compared to the Rams and Matthew Stafford are having some serious problems trying to come to an agreement. I think the Eagles' ceiling, especially going into next year after winning this Super Bowl, is pretty high. I think with that division, it's going to be interesting. We'll see how Washington fares. I think they're going to be improved for sure. Who knows with the Cowboys, and same with the Giants. I don't know. We'll see what they do with that #3 overall pick. But going back to the Eagles, Jeff, I got to ask you about a guy that I don't know if you have any insight on. I know you had some opinions on Twitter at some point in the last few years. Big Dom DeSandro. I got to ask you about this guy right here. What does he mean to the Philadelphia Eagles? I think he's worked for them for the last, 25 years or something like that. What does he mean to the Philadelphia Eagles? And can you kind of give us kind of a background of Big Dom DeSandro here?
Yeah, I think a lot of fans have kind of, they kind of look at him as kind of the face of the team. I don't know. I admit at times I think he's a bit cringy. He's always got to be in the shots and stuff. But I have seen recently some videos of him, and I know plenty of people that know him. They say he's a real down-to-earth guy. And I think he just happens to be in a lot of videos because he's essentially the security for the head coach. He's essentially a guy who makes sure all the guys on game day are good. Everybody, if you have a problem, let's say maybe you can't get home, you're at a bar, you call Dom, he sets it up. He basically handles, as an advisor to most of the players. He's big on game day as far as keeping everybody safe, that sort of thing. Sure. He's kind of a guy that it's kind of a cult favorite in Philadelphia. He kind of, if you've ever been to South Philadelphia, he is the antithesis of kind of what a person from South Philadelphia looks like.
Sure.
He's Italian. He most guys in South Philly look like Dom. He's just kind of a guy that's turned into kind of a lovable guy. He wears tracksuits. He's a pretty humble guy, though, from what I understand. And he does a great job. I mean, say what you want about him, but he kind of handles a lot of the stuff that you don't hear about. For sure. And kind of is able to sweep things under the carpet and do what you have to do as kind of a security guy in the NFL.
Absolutely. People like that, especially in the NFL, very, very important for sure. And I think he meant that to the Philadelphia Eagles. One thing I want to show on Big Dom DeSandro, A.J. Brown talking about the importance of Big Dom DeSandro and how he kept the team together. Take a listen.
Hey, man, every time we get a Philly Eagles guy on here, we've had a couple this year, huh? Like 4 or 5 of them. Yeah. We always got to give Big Dom some love, bro.
Man.
The godfather of Philadelphia. I tell him, bro. You got any Big Dom stories, or you just want to give Big Dom some love? Because he's going to be watching.
No, I ain't going to put his business out there.
Yeah, don't do that. We don't want to get on Dom's bad side, that's for sure.
Bro, listen,
he the GOAT, bro.
Dom is the reason, probably the reason, I ain't going to say probably. Dom is the reason why this team stay together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Dom is the security, the GM, the everything, anything you need.
Yep.
Go to Dom. He gonna make it happen for you.
Big Dom, man. Shout out Big Dom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do want to. I will add one other thing on Big Dom. Like I actually saw him kind of get out of his shell a little bit. There's a guy I follow that I know pretty well that. Basically, they went to Vegas last week, Dom and a lot of the players and this guy. He kind of came out of his shell a little bit. I've never really heard him talk, but like I've seen kind of him come out of his shell a little bit. And AJ Brown's right. Like he's a guy that like you get caught speeding on the the Ben Franklin Bridge. He's gonna speak to the police, make sure everything's worked out for you. And yeah, I think every team needs a player or a guy like that.
Absolutely. And one more thing I'll show on Big Dom before we move on. He spoke on, I believe it's some Italian-American heritage.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
He spoke on his heritage. Take a listen to this.
Domenico DeSandro. I am the Chief Security Officer and also Senior Advisor to the owner and GM for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is my 26th year with the Philadelphia Eagles. First, buonasera a tutti. A special thank you to the National Italian American Foundation for this honor. This is not something I'm used to. I'm usually the guy behind the guy or behind that guy. So what a great night to celebrate the Italian culture. Growing up in the Italian household was the best. My friends would come over and question why we have prosciutto, Zawajic, and Super Salad hanging in the garage. I've always been proud of being Italian. For example, wearing my Italian patch for the sidelines during our games, or wearing my Italian boot as always, or my cornicchio. The best part of being Italian is by far the food. And for those of you who know me, my pasta of choice has always been the gnocchi. That's probably why I'm this size. When kids were going down the Jersey Shore, we were in Italy having fun. We would spend summers having fun in my mother's hometown of Macchia di Serdia, or my father's hometown of Colli Avertuno. And we had great times traveling around Italy for years. So once again, thank you to Naya for tonight in this honor. I will continue to do the best to represent Italia. Ciao and grazie a tutti, and Forza Italia.
He is the quintessential South Philly guy. Like they're all like that. He's a nice guy. I've ribbed him a little bit, but he's actually a pretty good guy from what I understand.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to kind of spotlight him. I was curious, and I felt like you being a Philly guy kind of give his background. So absolutely. Shout out to Big Dom. Jeff, let's get into it. Let's move forward here. I got to ask you about this situation with Justin Tucker. He's got some things going here. Justin Tucker has over 16 different allegations from 16 women. Inappropriate sexual behavior at massage parlors, similar to the Sam Watson's situation, but kind of different. Can you kind of break down the legalities of this? What's going on with this shit? This is kind of a weird situation. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're all civil claims, right? So this isn't any criminal behavior, but basically people are saying that he did things during massage sessions, i.e. showing himself to people. A lot of the time he was erect while doing these massages. I have to wonder, though, and I think in these situations, it's really important. It's hard nowadays to understand, and a lot of people aren't going to ever do this, and it's wrong. But we need to give these people their days in court, because remember, the key words here are allegations. Yep. And if you look into some of the background of this case, some of the things that we've seen from his lawyer, there are multiple times that he was at certain spas and salons. For instance, one of them was a place called the QG Salon in Baltimore. He appeared there nearly 15 times. He then described, and he kept meticulous notes on this, that eventually he decided to leave that place. There's an email that I've seen where they are very gracious, telling him how great he was. He was very professional, essentially. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that kind of intend that a lot of the stuff that maybe they say happened, back at those times, they weren't saying that. So I think it's important that we let these things come out in court. A lot of the studios that he went to are now closed. So I think at the end of the day, like, he did keep records, like a lot of this stuff, as far as for tax purposes and things like that. I think what I'm further kind of blown away by is that at this point, and I think probably at this point, most teams have massage therapists, but I think at one point the Ravens didn't, so he had to acquire outside people to do that.
Okay.
Again, I think it's important that we let this kind of roll out, but there's a lot of things that you're seeing here. Like, I could send you the email where, like, the studio says essentially, like, it's been a pleasure working with you. As much as we'd love to see you back, we know that life will take you in different directions. Don't forget to tell all your coworkers about us. Like, and it was a direct email to him. So, and it comes from the lead massage therapist. So I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, and that is a very important point. And Tucker and his wife have come out and denied these allegations, obviously. Tucker's wife saying, "I believe my husband and love and support him fully." This is just interesting. I would ask, my biggest question is, why now? Why are 16 different women coming at him now? Is it because he's had such a long career? Is he a target? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't answer that. I do know, and this is kind of just because I live in this area. Baltimore is not that far from me. He was even at one point like the promotional guy for Royal Farms, which is a really big convenience store around here, like a really big one. He's kind of been the face of like a lot of things in the Baltimore area. But like, there's even one salon where on their website they have like a promotional photo of all the massage therapists with him in the spa. So like, why he's being targeted, my guess is it could be just maybe one person he had dealt with had his weird situation with him. Maybe people jumped on it to maybe get something out of it. But I think you got to give him his days in court or against this litigation. It seems like there's a lot of evidence that they weren't saying this tune several years ago, and now it's all of a sudden just coming to light and all at one time. I don't know. Do I think he's guilty? I don't know. There's a lot of proof here that say he may not be.
Absolutely, and that's why I brought you on to ask you this. But one thing I want to show is John Harbaugh's comments on the situation at the NFL scouting combine. He was asked about this. It kind of just gave brief comments to it. Take a listen to this.
Oh, absolutely. It's not what you want to wake up and read. You don't want to read about it. It's not something you want to see. I don't care what it is in terms of things that are hurtful and harmful to people. There's too many headlines like that, too many stories that you hear that just make you just sad, disappointed. And you don't want to ever see a circumstance, a situation, especially as it relates to, your world where, anybody's made to feel less than great when they come and are involved in a work experience somewhere, and as it touches all of us in our lives, we want to do everything we can to make sure that this is just the opposite, that everybody feels like they have a great work experience. You guys have been at our place every day, and you know what we try to do with that. So that's just really a tough deal, and the NFL is looking into it. They're going to come up, they're going to review it, they're going to try to gather all the facts, and hopefully we'll have an understanding of it at that time. And then once there's an understanding of it, then you have a chance to, make some decisions and determinations and things like that, and that's where we're at right now.
Absolutely. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, if they move on from him, they'll wait till the league year starts. But again, they're going to have to do their due diligence. And we were just talking about security people. The NFL is going to do that. But then again, I mean, if we compare it to like a Deshaun Watson, I mean, Deshaun Watson's actively played for the last several years, and he had significantly worse allegations against him, if there is a worse in the situation. You obviously have to take all these things seriously. But also, I think we do have a problem at this point with social media and all that kind of thing, that we say someone's guilty and we don't I'll relate it recently to a situation that went on social media. We have jumped on a college-age girl and that whole thing with the sleeping with, it's now coming out that it's possibly not true at all.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And like I really, and this is why I don't comment on a lot of this stuff a lot of the time, because you better be damn sure, and it could happen to anybody. This is a situation. She's just a regular person. She's not even a celebrity, and these things can really ruin someone's life. I mean, this one is huge. So I think you have to be very, very, and even in the Deshaun Watson situation, all that stuff, you got to be very careful when just assuming because one thing comes out that it's true.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. That's a great point, Jeff. And that brings me to my next point. With Deshaun Watson, he was like blackballed, and Houston ended up trading him, getting rid of him. The Ravens it's come out they will be evaluating kickers in the 2025 NFL draft. I'm not sure if this is different than any other year, but I ask you, what's next for the Ravens and Justin Tucker? Do you think that they'll eventually cut him? Do you think that they'll let him play and keep the relationship going because he's been there and they don't know? Wait.
I think in terms of I think I would think they would just as far as they have to do their investigation. I mean, he didn't. It was probably his worst season of his career. No, I mean, he was particularly poor at the beginning of the season. He's been in the league for 13 years. I mean, he is getting up there, but he's still a pretty effective kicker. And I'm sure they'll always look down the road. I mean, eventually you got to do it. It's not like he's a 4th, 5th year player. He's been in the league a long time. As far as this year, though, I mean, he was pretty average. I'm sure at some point they're going to have to start looking at new kickers. Maybe they bring in someone to challenge him a little bit, but do I think they'll move on from him? I mean, unless something jarring comes out about this and, if they deem that there's nothing going on here, I don't think it'll mean much of anything.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I asked you, because most people you ask are like, oh, he's gone. And I'm like, Deshaun Watson didn't immediately get cut. I think there's a lot of time that's going to be had and a lot of things that'll have to come out before they'll make that determination.
I mean, there's some pretty strong evidence like that his lawyers have provided, which would directly go against some of these allegations. So for instance, like if you went to a massage therapy place and everything was great, they then sent you an email, but then a year or two later, they're saying you did stuff. Well, you weren't saying that then. You sent me an email and said how great I was, Yeah,
exactly.
I just think we got to give him his day,
For sure. Absolutely. And we'll stay tuned to see how this develops and the NFL's investigation into this and get the truth of this whole situation as it comes out. But Jeff, I appreciate your insight on that. Sticking on the Ravens, I got to ask you about another situation that I guess occurred here. Former Ravens DN Terrell Suggs has pleaded guilty after flashing a gun at a Starbucks drive-thru and yelling pussy-ass cracker to a bystander. What's going on with this, Jeff?
Yeah, this goes back to March of 2024. He basically was in a drive-thru at a Starbucks, and I believe the motorist in front of him accidentally backed into his vehicle, and he and the driver got into like an argument. He allegedly threatened to kill the motorist. Essentially, he was charged, I believe, with a felony, and what they did was his lawyer went to them and got it reduced to basically disorderly conduct or something, a misdemeanor, and I believe he pled to it. So it'll just kind of be, they'll figure out some response to what will happen. He won't go to jail for it or anything, but I mean, listen, this happens a lot. I mean, people get into arguments, people have road rage, but you can't be saying you're going to kill people and showing them guns and stuff. But as far as it, I think it's a pretty big nothing burger. Especially in the grand scheme of things. And this happens all the time. This is why, like, when you get arrested by the federal government, a lot of the times people just plead to avoid trial. Right. They have the goods here, and they're just going to say, we don't want to deal with this. Will you just accept this charge? And they do it. So I think it's a pretty big nothing burger.
Yeah, I figured so. I just wanted to get your take on it. Saw this and interesting story there. Well, I got to ask you about your Penn State here. Penn State hired former Penn State quarterback Trace McSorley as their assistant quarterbacks coach. Now, I don't know if you have too much insight to this at all, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on former Penn State quarterback returning as an assistant quarterback coach.
Well, it's funny. I've been on record talking about the fact that like Penn State has never had a truly elite quarterback. Like they've always had good quarterbacks, ones that have went into the league. None of them have really ever been that great. Right. McSorley was a great quarterback at Penn State. He didn't really translate much to the NFL. But But again, I mean, these are the kind of people you hire to be coaches, guys who have the experience. He's obviously a guy who can teach younger people a lot. I know they also have made some other coaching moves recently. Anything I think they can do to improve the quarterback position. Look, I like Drew Aller. I think Drew Aller has a lot of work to still do. And yeah, I mean, this is kind of what college teams do. They hire guys called graduate assistants a lot of the time in basketball, where players that played there, they have the experience, have went to the playoffs or went to an NCAA tournament. Those are big, and a lot of the younger kids, they relate to them because they're 4 or 5 years older. So yeah, I think it's a good move. I think it'll help them. Look, generally, this, if you can't make it to the next level, you generally are going to go into coaching or media, and I'm sure he'll be a great coach.
Absolutely. And we saw McSorley working with Drew Aller last season for Penn State. Now, I got to ask you about Penn State last season. I thought they had a great path in the college football playoff, and they got stopped short. What are your thoughts on Penn State's so-called collapse at the end in the college football playoff last season?
Well, I think really it came down to a really bad decision by Aller in that final game. He made a throw that you just can't make. And it was the difference really in whether they moved on or didn't move on. It can't happen. I believed he should have came back. He needs to come back. And I think he will be one of the, on paper, one of the better quarterbacks going into next season. But, again, this is kind of what they are, a quarterback. They, a lot of the time, have a solid, good quarterback, but never a truly elite quarterback. They don't get the high level guys. They get good quarterbacks. Can Aller take the step and be a Heisman Trophy winner? I don't think.
Yeah, we'll see. Aller will have McSorley as his quarterback coach going into next season. But I got to ask you about Penn State's coach, James Franklin. How do you feel about James Franklin after another loss in a big-time game? And how do you feel about Penn State going into next year with Aller? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, they're going to have to replace a lot. Obviously, Abdul Carter's gone. I mean, Abdul Carter took over games last year at defensive end for them. And I think, the sad part about Penn State is they have become just, in college football, there's really only several teams that win, and they are not one of those teams. They're just a mediocre, good team each year, and they have accepted that mediocrity. Are they a team that's going to win 10, 11 games each year? Yeah. Are they going to get to the college football playoff? Yeah. But remember, they got to the college football playoff when it was 12 teams, right? Not 4. They're always good, but not good enough. And I think they've accepted that. Is it where I'd want to be? No. I would want to be the contender to win it every season. They're a contender that, maybe can win it, but do we ever actually think they can? No. They've never won a big game. He's never won a big game. And yes, he's 101-42 as the coach there, but when you look back and say, what has he actually won in terms of something big? It's largely been elusive. So would I have brought him back? Probably not. But, again, I am a guy who, like, as an Eagle fan, I expect them to be a Super Bowl contender every year.
Right.
I guess in Happy Valley, I think they had obviously a lot of things that have went on over the last 15 years with, kind of how the Paterno stuff ended. And I just think the one thing about James that they give a lot of credit to is he is a good ambassador to the university. He's obviously done a lot for taking them out of where they were. And I think that means a lot more to them maybe than just it should. I will respect that, though, because, again, like most teams, just about can you win? We don't care what you do off the field as long as you win. And I do have some respect for that at one level, but has he ever won the big game? No. Will he ever? I don't know.
And it's going to be tough with them. I mean, now you have the 12 team probably going to 14, 16 at some point playoff. But Penn State's even in the 12 team never got over the hump. And I thought they had the easiest path.
They did. You're 100% right. And you mentioned 16 teams. I really hope that doesn't happen. I would really like for it to just. I thought 12 was probably too many. Again, we have to accept what it is. Maybe we just keep it at 12 and just accept it that's what it's going to be.
Why do you say that?
Because I think we're again rewarding mediocrity. I liked 4, right? The 4 best teams. That said, I'm a gambler. I like more games. I mean, we had more games to bet on this season, and we did see really cool stories. Like an Arizona State or like a Boise. But I think all in all, like a lot of the games were particularly early, not great. But I'm never going to complain about more games, I guess.
Yeah, I think that the first round of the playoff with this new format was kind of a, I don't know, snooze fest, so to say. A lot of blowouts, a lot of cold weather games, kind of because they're playing at Penn State, out other places. I thought the first round was kind of a blur, and then you kind of started seeing some better football as you got in the later rounds. But this is what the NCAA wanted. I don't sit here and really complain about or harp on it too much. I think this is a new era of college football, transfer portal, NIL, so much movement, so much is different compared to when I was coming out 4 years ago and 10 years ago going back. So I don't have too much of a knock on it. If they decide to go to 14 or 16, which is what Joel Klatt said on Matt and I's show a few months ago, which I think they will, so be it. I think we'll figure it out, but I think you'll see some slower, interesting games in the earlier rounds.
One other point I do worry about with Penn State going forward, especially Drew Aller. I mean, how do they replace Tyler Warren, who's going to the NFL? We saw Carson Beck take a major step back once he lost Brock Bowers. Yeah. So, I mean, Tyler Warren was the best tight end in the country last year. He was huge for them at big spots. They still have Katron Allen, Nick Singleton at running back, but that receiver core wasn't great. Warren was really that valve, around the goal line or really at any part in the field. So, they're going to have to find a way to figure that out too.
Absolutely. And let's talk Warren and talk NFL draft. Tyler Warren's not working out the combine as far as I understand. I believe he's working out Penn State's pro day. But let's get into it. Jeff, Tennessee still holds the number 1 overall pick right now unless they trade out of it. You got Cleveland, the Giants, Patriots. How are you feeling about the top of the draft? Do you have any predictions, any odds? I think Cam Ward is heavy favorite still to the Titans. I think Travis Hunter's 8-1 to be the first pick off the top of my head. But how do you feel about the top of the draft? Any predictions? Go ahead.
Yeah, really sharp guy that I follow from a gambling standpoint played Carter to go number 1 last night. Obviously, then the news came out that he may have some surgical problems, but I got to tell you, and I've said this, I don't believe either of these quarterbacks. I don't think they're particularly strong. I mean, they're good. Would I take them number 1 overall and do I think they're going to be the corner franchise on my team or corner point of my franchise? No, I don't believe they are. No, but I think Carter is an elite player. I think he's the next great defensive end in the NFL. He truly took over games. And I think the Titans could also look maybe to free agency to fill their quarterback problems. So I think in that case, I would think that Carter would surely be the selection.
That's interesting. I agree with you about the Titans, that the Titans may go free agency for quarterback. I think if they are going to go pick a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick, they would have done what the Colts did with Andrew Luck 10 years ago and been like, we're taking this guy. This is our guy, not make it known. I think there's a lot of uncertainty with the top of the draft, especially at 1. Who knows what the Tennessee is going to do? Personally, I really think that if it's not Travis Hunter or Shador, they may trade out of it, to be honest. I could see them getting a lot of capital for that pick, whether that's Dallas maybe moving up, certain teams that might want to move up, the Raiders. I don't think the Raiders are going to take a quarterback, but certain people think they'll move up. Do you see any movement happening with these picks at all? Is there any teams that you think could move up to take that top pick at all, or second pick, any movement?
I mean, I got to look more into the capital that some of these teams have, but I mean, I think the problem that you have in like the top 5 is there's a lot of stupid teams in the top 5, which, like Cleveland's always generally very stupid. The Giants obviously make a lot of bad decisions. Like, I think the team that could come out looking really good in this draft is a team like New England. They're going to have an opportunity to go with either the best offensive tackle in the draft, which they need, or I think Travis Hunter. Like, I think the top 3 is probably going to be a combination of Carter, Ward, and Shedeur Sanders probably. In that case, look at a team like Jacksonville. They may have the opportunity to take Hunter. I mean, New England could have the opportunity to take Hunter. I mean, you look at Drake May and say, what would he look like with it, with someone like that, even on defense? So, I don't know. The Giants will screw something up, though, for sure. And I almost can see it right now. They'll take, let's say it's Cam Ward or Shadur, and neither player will work out for them. That's just kind of how it works for that group. So, no, I don't know. I got to look more into some of the capital that these teams have, but like I think a team like Jacksonville or New England will come out looking real good.
Absolutely. I think New England and Travis Hunter is a great fit, and I think that's one of the teams that would let Travis Hunter play both ways. He's made it very known in his press conference at the Combine today that he wants to play 100% both ways. He's different.
I don't
know
how that's possible, man. I mean, I watch these kids that go from like college basketball that they're dominant to the NBA, and it's just they're not. Like you look at a guy like Zach Edey, prime example. Zach Edey was a dominating college player. He can only play against certain teams in the NBA because it's so much faster and I'm not saying college isn't. There's no way he can do that. And JB used to say that all the time, and I couldn't have agreed more with him. It's just such a difficult thing to do. I mean, to do that week after week. Look, you see it in high school. People do it. You saw it once ever in college, really. It doesn't happen much. I can't see it happening. He needs to pick one way and just go with it.
I don't agree. I don't think he'll play 100% of the ways in the NFL, like 100% both sides in the NFL. I think they'll find a package for him, like on offense, and then he'll be primarily a DB. I really think he's
I guess if you say it like that, I mean, it makes sense. You know, you put him in high leverage situations, let's say around the goal line or whatever. I guess in terms of that, like it would happen. But I'm saying more or less like playing every snap. Like there's no way he could ever do that. Like it's hard to play as an NFL player, you know, week to week with just it being so grueling. You got Thursday night games. You got, you know, it's just plus you're dealing with the greatest players in the world, right? So I think you're probably right in terms of maybe they have a little package for him as a receiver, but I would choose to play more from a defensive standpoint if I was him. And in terms of Jacksonville, I think that could work out well in the secondary.
I think New England is the spot. Personally, I think him on the other side of Christian Gonzalez would be electric. I think Mike Vrabel is the only head coach who can say who's actually done it and played on both sides of the ball in the NFL. I think that he would be the one to give that Travis that opportunity. I think people in Jacksonville have also made that known. I got to ask you about the quarterbacks. You said you're not too big on the quarterbacks. Cam Ward or Shador, who are you bigger on? If you had that number one overall pick and had to pick a quarterback, which quarterback would you take, or neither Cam Ward or Shador? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, as you know, it's extremely unlikely that it's not one of those two. So I will just say I would probably go with Shador Sanders. Cameron Ward at times just was very skitsy, just a guy that was, I think, very gimmicky in the offense that he was in. Sanders, I think, to me, was just more effective. He was just a guy that I feel like just more comfortable with a quarterback. Like I said, I'm not really running to back either of these guys. I think Shador would be more of the option, at least to me, but it's not going to be anyone else but those two. A quarterback that maybe off the beaten path, I think if we're asking about that, you know, maybe I would go with, I mean, it's slim pickings. I mean, there's not a lot of great selections here. I don't even know where I would even go. I mean, the quarterback position has gotten worse and worse over the years. Yeah. But yeah, in this situation, I would say Shador, surely.
Yeah, and I got to ask you about Shador's draft stock. You think he's going to go in the top 3? I'm going to make this known right now. I think he's going to fall. I think he's going to fall to pick 7 to the Jets, and it's going to be Matt McChesney's worst nightmare, personally, because Matt would freak out if that happens. But I really think that him not throwing at the combine, all this noise, I really think he's the best quarterback, personally. If I want the Titans to take him, and I think he'd be huge out here in Nashville, out in Tennessee. But I think ultimately he's going to fall to the Jets, which is not really falling. I think a top 10 pick either way is not bad for him. Good situation for the most part. Just the Jets as a franchise are a nightmare. But I think the team around him is not bad at all.
I think a guy that I had watched a lot of in college, and he was at Ohio State, was a big-time kid. Then he goes to Syracuse, had a huge season last year. Kyle McCord, I think he's a guy, you know, in an offense that's very vertical and downfield. You know, they like to throw the football. I think he's a guy. I know he's created some buzz recently in some of his workouts and stuff. Look, is he a first round, second round pick? Probably not, but I think he's a guy down the road that could be a bit of a sleeper. He's a guy who has pretty decent size. I mean, they threw the football a lot. They were top 5 in a passing play percentage metric, but we'll see. Is it going to be like a team that needs a quarterback right now? No, but like a quarterback down the road, I think he'd be a strong selection.
No, I'm big on Kyle McCord too. I think if you watched Syracuse at all last season, their passing offense was electric. My buddy was a center at Stanford last season. They went up there and beat Syracuse. But I've watched a lot of Syracuse games. Kyle McCord is electric. Fran Barron and that team, they had a hell of a season last year.
I will say though, with terms real quick in the draft, you mentioned New England maybe goes with Shadur. This group really need offensive line help. I mean, this was the worst graded line in the league. Just had no help up front. And look, we've talked about it time and time again. You win in the trenches in the NFL. If you don't have a good group up front, it breaks down everything. They were 31st in pressure rate, 29th in sack rate allowed. They were terrible. They couldn't run the football really. They need to go out and grab an offensive lineman. Is it Will Campbell? Most likely. He's the best offensive lineman. Kelvin Banks, possibly. Yeah. There's a lot of options. I think they maybe go with an O lineman.
Yeah, I think if they go O-line, I think Campbell's the guy. I think he's solidified. Most offensive lineman has to be. Another offensive lineman, a small school guy that I will give some light to. His name's Jackson Slater, coming out of Sacramento State. I think he's really going to make some noise coming out of Sacramento State. I think he could get drafted. Another guy we'll mention, replacement for Cooper Kupp, possibly for the Rams. I think they could pick up in the later rounds. His name's Efton Chisholm. Comes from the same school as Cooper Kupp, same type of player, but I think he's electric. One of the best football players I played with and against. So shout out to him.
I'll throw a late first round guy, Luther Burden out of Missouri. I thought at times in his career he was one of the best receivers in the country. He was at Missouri with Brady Cook and Theo Weiss and some of those guys. But Luther Burden, coming out of high school, was a big time recruit. Maybe like a Houston. They had some injury problems. We know that Stephon Diggs is a free agent. Luther Burden in that offense could be electric. I really like Luther Burden III. Good hands, electric player.
Stud. He was Brady Cook's top target for Missouri. He's a hell of a player. I got to ask you about the Raiders and Pete Carroll. What are your thoughts on that hire? They hold the 6th overall pick. I really think that they'll go defense, just knowing Pete Carroll. And there's no way he says no to 2 of the Michigan cats, either the big D tackle Graham or the Johnson in the corner. How do you feel about Pete Carroll and the Raiders?
Yeah, I'm an old school guy. I mean, I understand that they've kind of moved into a new league where you want younger people and people that are relatable. But I think Pete is still very relatable to young people and is a great NFL coach. He's been one of the better ones. I like it. I've always been a Pete guy. I've always enjoyed him as a coach. I will say, I don't know, totally agree. I think they need to go with some sort of like a skill player, right? I mean, they have Brock Bowers, but what the hell else do they have there, really? Do you go with McMillan out of Arizona, maybe? They need a quarterback too, to be quite frank. But they have many ways they can go. That's going to be a tough thing there. That's it. They have a couple of guys on defense they're excited about. I think you make a good point, though. Their secondary has been poor. They have some guys, and it looks like they're going to be able to hold on to the Max Crosbys of the world, the Spillanes of the world, but they've got to get better in the secondary. They have problems at quarterback, at receiver. They could go a multitude of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I mentioned Graham, the D tackle from Michigan. They also have Christian Wilkins, so I'm like, that's why I said they could also go with the DB, help show up that secondary. I don't know if they're going to bring back Jack Jones or anybody, but definitely could use some secondary help. And if Travis Hunter somehow falls to 6, they have to pick him because Travis Hunter should.
Well, that would work perfectly.
Yeah. So I don't know. But man, let's see here. Any other teams? Your Philadelphia Eagles hold the 32nd pick. Any spots they need to address? What are your thoughts on them?
I think the one thing is obviously, we'll see kind of where they go. They've always kind of made these splash decisions at free agency. I think if they just kind of hold off and don't do anything, they've got to address the pass rushing spot. They're probably not going to be able to keep Josh Sweat. I think Josh Sweat's gone. They need to go out and and Brandon Graham is right near retirement, probably will retire. They need to go out and replenish their pass rushing group. Nakobe Dean was injured late. He may not be ready for the season to start. So they need to go out and address that. And I would be sure that at that final pick in the first round, they're going to look towards an edge rusher, maybe like a James Pierce out of Tennessee. Yeah, that could be an option for them. I will say I'm very curious about a team. We talked about the Chiefs and the Chargers are obviously getting better, but Denver was a team who made the playoffs. I think Ginty would be interesting to them. You don't really see a lot of the time running backs taken in the first round, but I think Ginty is a guy that could be a star for a long period of time. He can play and take a ton of snaps. He could take some pressure off Bo Nix. They have a pretty decent receiver group there. Ashton Ginty, I think that'd be a good selection. Omarion Hampton, you might see 2 running backs taken in the first round.
Yeah, that's right. 2 running backs. And if Ginty falls to 20, if you had to pick between the two, Ginty or Hampton, who do you think is better and who would you pick?
I would take Ginty. But that said, Omarion Hampton was really dynamic. He was the best running back in the country outside of Ginty. You were never going to put him above Ginty, but he was really impressive, man, at North Carolina. And I think he'll make a lot of money in the NFL too. He's a little bit, obviously smaller. He's 6 foot. A little bit smaller, but elusive. Maybe Pittsburgh, maybe they look to him, someone like that. Two running backs is probable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see with Pittsburgh. They got to figure out the Najee Harris situation, the contract, but it looks like he may be out of there. They also have a smaller running back, Jalen Warren. How do you feel about your Pittsburgh Steelers? I don't know if they're your Pittsburgh Steelers, but in the same state. I know you're not a big fan of Mike Tomlin, and you feel he's mediocre, I believe. How do you feel about the Steelers? Go ahead.
No, he's definitely mediocre, and no, I'm a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's it. They are in my state, so I guess they are my team as well. I'm not a Tomlin guy. I think he's extremely mediocre. He's been mediocre for a long time. As far as where do they go, they're another team that kind of have to just get better on offense. At times they showed some flashes, but they've got to get better. And you mentioned some of the issues with Najee Harris. A guy like Hampton, I think, would be perfect for them. We know they're always kind of, downhill. They like to run the football, play defense. They've got some great pieces on defense. They're a well-run organization. I would have just moved on from Tomlin by this point.
Any shot they take a quarterback, what do they do at quarterback? Do they bring back Fields? They're not bringing back Russ, I don't think. What are your thoughts on their quarterback situation?
I think they're a team. Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but I kind of will. I mean, Russell Wilson really kind of fell off towards the end of the season. I think you just kind of get what you get with him at this point. He's going to give you periods of time. He's kind of like Jameis Winston, right? There'll be times where Jameis Winston can be really effective in like one game, but he can't do it for 4, 5, 6 games in a row. That's just how it is, unfortunately. That's the problem with the quarterback position. It is so poor. You got to hope to find someone that works. And if it doesn't work, look, but they've had this problem for a long time. They have never addressed this position after Ben Roethlisberger. It was, the Duck Hodges, the Mason Rudolphs. And you know what? I said for years, why aren't they addressing this? They know Ben Roethlisberger is going to be done eventually, and they've never addressed it. And now it's piecemealing it. Oh, we're going to go with Russ Wilson. Then it's, this and that. And before you know it, they then fail. And then we say, well, what happened here? Well, you don't have a good quarterback. Right. It's a shame because you're wasting the primes of some really great players like a TJ Watt.
That's true.
But they love mediocrity. This is who they are.
Yeah, I think Tomlin, if anything, is they do things a certain way and they don't change it. I got to ask you, if they somehow take another rookie quarterback, Jackson Dart, do you think that could be a good fit for Pittsburgh? Any thoughts? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a question mark after those first couple. I mean, as I said, I think like the problem that McCord will have, we talked about him, is he's not one of these like mobile quarterbacks. He's really like a passer, like a pocket passer, which look, I still think it's very necessary in the NFL. You know, like you can switch up your spots, and that just tells me that the Steelers probably wouldn't pick a guy like that. They would go towards more like a Jalen Milroe or someone like that. All of the quarterbacks outside of the top two that we mentioned, like Dart is a second-round pick. All these guys are later round picks. McCord could be value, maybe late in the second round. He gets rid of the ball really quick. He's got a good intuition. He's very smart. I like McCord. I like him over like a Milroe or Dart personally. But I think again after the top two, it's questionable.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just brought up Dart because I think that they need to address the quarterback position. I don't think it's Fields. I don't think it's Russell Wilson. I think it was either of them. They would have stuck with them. But I think honestly, with that pick in the first round, with the amount of defensive guys coming out, you mentioned the defensive end position. There are so many guys coming out that.
Well, let me tell you this: they're not going to take him in the first round. The Steelers ain't taking a quarterback in the first round. There is no quarterback taking the first round. True. And you know another thing, and this is something I noticed towards the end of the season. You got to make your receivers happy. And somebody in your chat's talking about George Pickens, and George Pickens was visibly like annoyed, right?
Yeah.
And you have to keep those people happy, and they need to start making the quarterback position they don't seem to care about it, and what they're going to start doing is pissing people off and annoying people, and then you're going to lose good players because of your ineptitude.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you gotta keep Pickens happy. People have issues with his attitude. He is a freak athlete, receiver. If you ever played football, most star receivers are a lot like that. So that is just what it is. And gotta keep them happy. We'll see what they do at the quarterback position. I think you could see them probably going with the free agent if it's not a later round guy at Pittsburgh. But like I mentioned, they'll probably go defense with that 21st pick and stay true to form as always.
I think one thing, like a quarterback's, like you look at like a Jalen Milroe, like I see him going to like a contender and he like kind of becomes something maybe. Like the key word with him is going to be like patience. I don't think he's going to come in and play right away. I think a lot of people envision like he'll be Jalen Hurts, right? Jalen Hurts coming out, you took a shot on him. And I remember when the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts, I went viral. I didn't understand it. It didn't make any sense to me because they had just signed Carson Wentz. It was, and I thought, well, okay, I don't really get this, but whatever. I think a team like that, like a team, I'm trying to think of it, like put that thing back up of all the teams.
I'll
look at like, I don't know, maybe like a Minnesota.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say the Vikings.
Yeah, like if like the Sam Darnold stuff that like work out, like he could be there to kind of. But they have JJ McCarthy, so that's a bad example. But a team like that Tampa, maybe, like a team that you have a quarterback, but is he the guy for the next 7 years? I don't know. He's going to be a guy you have to wait on. I think it's not going to be right away with Jalen Milroe. He's not going to come in on day one of next season and be a starting quarterback. At least.
What about the Seahawks?
That's a good one.
Sam Howell. I don't know why they traded for Sam Howell. No offense, as a guy who grew up a Seahawks fan, I don't know why they traded for Sam Howell. They lost a bunch of picks doing that. For no
another team, maybe in the second or third round, you could look at, maybe like the Colts, right? I mean,
Indy.
Joe Flacco's obviously not a long-term answer. Anthony Richardson,
no,
he ain't the guy. So you have a Jalen Milroe there is kind of like a Justin Fields type of player that can like challenge and maybe take it over. That's exactly what Jalen Hurts did. He comes in as the backup. Carson Wentz then just was terrible, got injured, and he, they then moved on, and the rest is history. And he then becomes a Super Bowl winner. So
I don't know if I'm as big on Milroe as you are. I just think
I'm not big on him. That's the thing. Like I'm trying to make chicken salad out of chicken because I don't really have much here. So I'm trying to be nice to these people. Are any of these guys, the next Tom Brady or even the next quality quarterback in the NFL? Probably not.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think the goal is to find the Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, it's a really tough quarterback class. And I think Milroe, like you mentioned, is going to have to go somewhere where he can be developed. I think Anthony Richardson lacked development. You brought up Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts went to Oklahoma for a year. I think that was key in his development because I was huge on Jalen Hurts when he was at Bama. They sat him, and he ended up transferring, going into the Lincoln Riley offense. Gets into a passing offense that's quarterback friendly. He looks really good. Goes in the NFL for Philly.
I also think like with the developing and maturity of quarterbacks, like I'm looking at, especially in a quarterback, I'm looking at that mind, right? Like Jalen Hurts is really good because is he the most talented quarterback in the league? No, but there's a lot of things about him that I see as like a fan. He's a great guy, very respectful, low key, just has the right mindset, right? You need that, man. You need that to be like, I'll never be truly successful at the top of my game because my mind fucks and I say things I shouldn't say. I don't have that way of thinking like he does. You got to be like that. And all these kids, you got to look into, like people talk about Wonderlic. I need to know my quarterback is smart. I do. Like that's important to me. We'll see.
Jalen Hurts is like he's a bad motherfucker. Like I'm a big fan of Jalen Hurts, and he definitely deserved to win a Super Bowl. He's a bad motherfucker, like you mentioned. Squat 600 pounds. His dad, kind of instilled that tough, hardcore, old school mindset into his brain, and you see what came of it.
And the one thing we know about Jalen Hurts is he's never going to be like Antonio Brown acting stupid. Right. He's never going to have 6 different babies' mothers, Like you look at some of these guys, like Tyreek Hill, like some of these guys, they're complete messes, Yeah. I don't want that near my team, right? I don't like you look at the Eagles, all the kids on this team are, there's never an issue. Those are the kind of teams that win Super Bowls.
Yeah, they hold it together, the Eagles, that's for sure. And that's a credit to Sirianni and Big Dom, like we mentioned too. But they have a lot of personalities in that team. Jalen Carter, all these different guys, but they kept together and won a Super Bowl. And shout out to the Eagles. My favorite part of the Eagles is their running game. I think their offensive line was terrific. I think they have a great offensive line coach. That's the reason their offensive line, or part of the reason their offensive line is so great. Obviously, getting Becton at that right guard spot, like you mentioned, was pivotal. Seeing him win a Super Bowl, he was so emotional after the turmoil he went through with the Jets.
And
at Louisville, man, he was a hell of a player, and then went through what he went with the Jets. But go ahead.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because there's something you mentioned, Big Dom and Nick, right? There's a guy that no one talks about on the Eagles, and you would only know him if you were a true football guy or a fan. Mm-hmm. The Eagles have a long-time offensive line coach, Jeff Stoutland.
Yep.
Okay, Jeff Stoutland is, and like I'm sure Matt's talked about Jeff Stoutland. Like Jeff Stoutland is the king of offensive line coaches. Okay, and Becton talked about he's the only coach that ever believed in me. Right. I come here, I'm kind of like a journeyman guy. And you look at what he's done. I mean, he's matured. Like Jordan Mailata never even played football.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like he's worked in some of these kids that like – and another thing about offensive line play is depth, right? If you have a great starting lineup, you need a couple of depth pieces as well. Right. And you look at this team, they can bring in, a Tyler Steen and play right away. You could – like – remember during the Redskin game? I cut out for a second. But yeah, they have great offensive line coaching and play.
Yeah, and they're not afraid to if they make a mistake drafting a guy, not to throw any shade. This is my guy, Andre Dillard. They drafted him. He didn't work out, and they moved on from him for Mailata, ironically. That's a credit to Stoutland, like you mentioned, one of the best minds and offensive line coaches in the NFL. It's like him and Bill Callahan and with Tennessee Titans, I think, is also one of the greatest offensive line coaches in history of football, to be honest.
Those are the coaches those are the things that create a long-standing winning tradition, right? The right coaching, the right guys that just understand people. He's great. He's a great coach.
Absolutely. Well, man, Jeff, I appreciate you joining, brother. Thank you so much for joining my show. I really appreciate you. You gave great insight on the Justin Tucker situation, your Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl. We got a little story about Big Dom DeSandro. So much more NFL draft news and stuff, so we'll stay tuned this offseason and love to have you back on again soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you enough for joining, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I had fun, man. I'll definitely come back whenever. Thanks for having me. Good to see some familiar faces. I haven't seen some of these guys in a while, but thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Enjoy your Thursday, man. Can't thank you enough for joining. I'll hit you up offline, but thank you for joining, brother. I appreciate it.
Sounds good, brother.
All right. Man, shout out to Jeff Nadu, host of the Sit Down Crime podcast, for joining the show, college basketball betting extraordinaire. Shout out to Jeff. It was a great interview. I appreciate Jeff for joining. If you're watching, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and become a member of the Bailey Price Media Army. If you'd like to donate and help the show continue to grow, hit that super chat button and let your voice be heard. But I appreciate you guys watching. We will be back here on Tuesday with a special guest. I'm working on a special guest for Tuesday. Stay tuned for that. I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a great show on Tuesday as well. Shout out to Nadu for joining. Nadu, definitely have to have Nadu back on the show as well. For all those watching, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys on Tuesday. I will be live on 0 to 60 tomorrow with Matt McChesney. I'll be live with Coach JB on Slap Nation at 1 p.m. Eastern. Matt's show 0 to 60 at 3 p.m. Eastern. Obviously, producing the Coach JB show, the realest show on planet Earth, 9 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. But I can't thank you guys enough for joining on this fine Thursday. Enjoy the day, and I'll see you soon. Peace.